Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. We are back for another YaZo strategy talk here at these. We try to keep them short and sweet, where we can help business leaders cut through the noise, focus on what really drives growth. Today's topic is one that we get asked about all the time: social media. More specifically, how do you actually build a social strategy that works for your business? Not just posting for the sake of doing it or chasing trends, but creating a sustainable presence that supports your growth. If you're an SMB, you're trying to make sense of what to post, where to post, and why, this one's for you. So let's dive in, Mom. Why don't you kick us off just with kind of like an overview, and then I'd really love to dive into, I think we get asked about this all the time, the difference between presence, engagement, and growth.
Yeah. Well, I think number one, it's if we're going to just talk about social media strategy, aside from those three things, is that when you don't have a strategy, if you're a small business, and I mean, small business runs the gamut from, a one-person startup to, a large small business, and which can be doing millions of dollars. So time in all of those cases is key. And so what we find is when there's not a strategy, and a strategy can include who's doing what, when, and where, it gets pushed down. And so it's very easy to have, after a few months, have no presence at all. And so we all know that despite everything, that we're going to talk about, people do use social media to vet businesses. Yes. And whether or not they're going to do business with them. That's despite the engagement, whatever. They can go in and search the YaZo group and see whether we have a presence or do not have a presence on social media. And so that is the way when we get research that people are using that as a means to determine, am I going to do business? Is this boutique worth me visiting? What's that coffee shop like? What is that large tech company like it across the board, across industry? So I think strategy in and of itself, you should have one.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think that sometimes social media gets a bad rap, right? And we have to understand that social media now is like when the internet started. If you didn't have a website, people didn't believe that you were a credible business. Now it's, if you don't have a social page that's active, you don't a credible business. So
yes.
It is a little bit of a catch-22 in a way that, it is almost, what we would coin the term, the necessary evil. It needs to be done to make sure that you're there. But I think if you get your mindset switched off of the necessary evil and look at it as a necessary opportunity.
Oh, I love that.
You can build a strategy around your business that shows your culture, that shows your expertise, that talks about your services. And frankly, the most important piece that we see, it tells stories. If you aren't telling stories on social that your customer or your target audience can't see themselves in that story, then you're missing the boat. I mean, there are other opportunities, right? Like the culture piece. We do a lot with like life at a business, like that's a hashtag to talk about what your culture is, what your organization looks like, what are you doing in the community, what are you doing with, organizational events. So those are all, I think, really important pieces of a social strategy. But let's talk about, the difference between presence, engagement, and growth.
Yes.
I think a lot of businesses just assume being active is being effective. And that's frankly not the case. You really need to frame it where, presence is you exist, right? We talk about that. You set up your profiles, your branding is consistent, and you post on a semi-regular basis. But that's not necessarily enough. You have to look at the engagement piece. Are people interacting? Are there likes? Are there comments? Are there shares? That's really where you move the needle, right? Is the engagement piece. And then how are you using that engagement piece to drive growth? Are you leveraging links to drive traffic to your website? Are you building out ad campaigns to generate leads? Are you building awareness? Are you trying to increase conversions? All of those things really determine the strategy and then ultimately the ROI that comes out of that. So I think it's important to sort of ask yourself as a business leader, what do I want my social media to do for my business?
Yes.
That's really like a very important question.
And I think just to interject, like if your goal is presence just for vetting, okay, that's fine. But you still would want, think about like, okay, we're not getting any engagement when we post this, but when we post this, we get a little bit of engagement. And you'd be surprised when you look at research on like what's good engagement. Some people are like, I'm doing terrible. Then I vet in their industry what good engagement is. And I'm like, you're blowing away the numbers of what good engagement is in your industry. So like, don't set your numbers so high, ridiculously high, which I think people are doing because of the influencers that are out there. And
Absolutely.
then, yeah, have high goals. I'm not saying that, but like also don't beat yourself up. And then look at how can I strategically improve engagement. And for like businesses that are B2B that are just using it more as a vetting tool, that aren't using it, they'll get to the point where they say, okay, we want to get leads from this. You start talking about the ad, like how are we going to turn these into ads, right? Well, there's a sweet spot in between that where you can use your own employees and people that are following and you and in your community to start sharing and engaging with your posts to train the algorithm, right? Some of that still exists. People say, well, nobody understands the algorithm anymore. Like there is a lot of that, like
Sure. It's
stuff
ever
out there.
evolving.
It's true. It's ever evolving. I'm not going to sit here and say that like I know every single thing that came out on social platforms in the last 24 hours because that's how fast it's moving. But if you're not willing to try some of the basics,
Yes.
then you don't really have a strategy. And a basic could be sending out in your internal company newsletter, the 3 top posts you did that month and asking them to share, like, and engage, because your audience is different than my audience. My audience is different than my coworker sitting beside me here. That is truth and it still works. But there's all these other things now that we have to be aware of, right?
Absolutely. No, and you
And
hit
that's
the nail
where,
on the head on a couple of those. I mean, I think that first, the point about, the analytics, people get caught up in the analytics and the numbers. And I think you have to look at the analytics as it pertains to your audience today. Not looking at just like the number of followers, but what was the engagement percentage within those followers. You need to really look at your audience. Of course, the goal is to grow your audience, but you should always look at it from a perspective of, okay, here's what we know. Here's what the audience that we have. What does the engagement look as it with that in mind, right? More of the percentages versus the total count.
right.
And the other piece is it takes a village. I know we say that a lot at YaZo because it does. Marketing takes a village, and so does social engagement. And the beautiful part about social network is that we all have different networks. And the more that we engage, the more exposure we give to the business using our networks. So that's really an
Yes.
opportunity is leaning into those internal employees or finding those internal, what we call champions, to help champion your social media externally using their network.
Yeah.
And it really shifts, I think, when we talk about this, then folks go, well, okay, well, what platforms should we be on? Because there's a gazillion of them. Where should we play and where do we need to spend most of our time and efforts? And I think if you look at it from a perspective of just doing social to do social, you end up spreading yourself too thin, which ultimately leads to weak results and people get burnt out and they quit doing it. Right. So if you look at it from a platform perspective, let's just kind of go through some of the top ones. LinkedIn, it is number one for B2B. If you're in B2B or you're service-based, that's where you need to be. And you think about thought leadership, case studies. Do you have recruitment, talent acquisition strategies? Are you building credibility? Are you sharing testimonials? So that's really where LinkedIn shines, is that B2B space. Instagram, that's more visual first, storytelling, ideal for like, your lifestyle brands, maybe your local businesses. You had mentioned like a coffee shop, showing what is the atmosphere in the coffee shop, leaning into those sort of aesthetics and storytelling elements. The last kind of two that I want to mention are Facebook, still really strong for community building and events and targeting sort of that older demographics, and ads work really, really well in the meta space in between Facebook and Instagram. The last sort of two are more video based. You can, of course, use video throughout LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. But if you look at TikTok and YouTube Shorts, this is really for brands that want to tap into what we would call like discoverability, and they want to educate and entertain quickly. We are finding a lot of success internally at YaZo with a few of our brands and clients that we work with, where YouTube Shorts are driving viewership, which ends up driving subscribers, which ends up impacting the overall engagement, and they're digging deeper because they want to be educated. So I think if you look about it like almost like a matrix, right, of what type of business are you? that will then help us select the platforms to be in and where not to waste our time.
Right. And even if you get some content, you can share it on the other channels, even if it's not like it's not more time. Even if it's not where like you think I don't need to waste any time on Instagram. Well, if you're doing it on Facebook, it's going to Instagram if you post properly. So like, yes, you want to do your strategy based on where you need to be, but it's not really a waste of time if somebody just chooses to look for you on Facebook and you're there. That's a good thing. It's just that that's not where you're spending all of your time with regards to how are we going to get engagement here? How are we going to throw any dollars behind this? Like, it's like changing your mind and your perspective to say like reuse this content everywhere you possibly can. Because one thing that is changing, and I've noticed this a lot because I do a lot of research on generational posting, and that there's buyers, even in a corporation now, we have people from 70 to 21, or younger working in a company. That's like multiple generation. And you're finding that older generation where they used to say they're only on Facebook, that is such not the truth anymore. They are literally like figuring it all out. Yes. So they are they're learning. Not everyone in that generation, but they're learning at such a fast pace to be on. So some of these things that we thought even 5 years ago in terms of where is my audience aren't even true today. And I shared this, I have a 93-year-old mother who's on social media all the time.
All the time. Yeah, exactly. And I love that point because it really does go back to be where your audience is at. And if you don't know, it's a great opportunity for you to do a survey. Go to your customer base and include in that survey, what platforms do you most use for social media? And use that data to drive where your content should live. So I love that point. And I think that it's really, really important to lean into that. You talked a little bit earlier though, Ma, about, metrics. And I think it's important to talk about this because there are performance metrics that matter, but it's not, what we call like vanity metrics, right? How many followers do I have, right? It's frankly, it's not necessarily the amount of followers, but what is driving decisions and helps you then drive improvement. So just a couple things to sort of clarify here from a metrics perspective. There's reach and then there's impressions. Are people actually seeing your content or is it just being served, right? So reach, it's out there. How many people did it reach? Impressions, how many people did it actually like get the impression from? So like there's a difference there.
Right.
There's the engagement rate. Are people actually resonating with your message? This is sort of a benchmark. I think, engagement rate is something that's really important to lean into. In addition to that, it's click-through rate. So engagement rate is more of like, are they engaging with the post? Are they liking, loving, sharing, commenting? That's engagement. Then there's the click-through element. That's really where we talk about the conversions piece to generate leads. Are they clicking through to something? Are they taking action? Maybe clicking a link in bios? Are they clicking a story link or a website traffic? That's where you can really start to lean into to see, okay, we are driving some conversions. Now, how do we capture those conversions? For more service-based businesses, leads and conversions are typically like booking meetings, right? Or are you collecting some form of emails? Are you building a newsletter list for ongoing communication? You can do that through social to build your newsletter list to allow people the opportunity to sign up.
Text list.
And the other cool part about this is there's, for example, like LinkedIn, and we're working on some of this strategy with a few of our clients, is the LinkedIn newsletter. So you already have maybe a newsletter that goes out via email. Are you repurposing that for LinkedIn and creating a LinkedIn newsletter because people are spending time on LinkedIn? So again, it's really about playing with those pieces to figure out what makes up your puzzle, right? Your social strategy puzzle. So
and I want to interject, be very careful not to say, well, I never do that, so nobody else does. Because I never, for example, like I would rather do my emails in my email than my in-mails in LinkedIn. However, in-mails in LinkedIn are extremely engaged. And so like we have to always break down mentality of whoever the CEO, the CMO, whoever we're working with, of like, just because you never did something doesn't mean somebody else doesn't do it. So you want to do all the things, not just the thing that you do, because you are an anomaly in and of yourself. We all are. Like I have my habits, you have a different habit. So you do want to use data. Like if it showed nobody does this, then we're not going to do it.
Exactly.
But if it shows you a significant portion of people in your particular audience do it, then just because you don't do it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Like that mentality actually does kill strategies, because we get that a lot where somebody's like, I just don't believe people still read emails.
It's a bias that you create within yourself.
Yes. And so you have to kind of learn to keep that out. Does that mean that you're going to get a gazillion leads coming in a week from it? No, but it's like you have to follow the data at some point, because this is all a constantly changing thing. And one other thing I'll say is like when you get a click through, that doesn't even mean, so that's just the social piece of it. And then there's like what happens when they click through, because when they click through, and that's for a whole nother topic we can't get into today, but like when they click through, if what they're clicking through to isn't interesting to them, then there's abandonment that happens. So like, it's not just, okay, we got them to click through, because, oftentimes we see like high click through and then low engagement. You have to figure out what's going on that landing page or wherever you sent them, that there's low engagement there then. And sometimes you don't, let's just be honest. Sometimes we don't know at first. We can use all of the best data in the world, all the best research, what we take in from the leaders in an organization, and they're so excited. And then it's like, that's not what the people wanted to see. We got to tweak it. And that's where AI and some of the tools that are out now are cool, because they can help you, easily do A/B testing and do some things that make your ads a lot more effective. But that's a whole nother topic, but I just want to say it because you talked about click-through rate, and some people think, oh, well, we got amazing click-through rate, but then there's not
there. Yeah.
Results
so
aren't there.
It really is a funnel. And I think that's important to think about social as a funnel as well. So, we can get into that in a future topic, but I love that. And I think the last point on the analytics that you touched on is that it is important to look at the analytics from an A/B perspective. What messages are resonating? What posts are getting the most engagement? And use that to inform your future content development. Don't guess, optimize. So I think that's the biggest thing. And then the last thing I want to touch on, because we're trying to keep these short and sweet and brief, and I know that we could expand upon this quite a bit. But the last one is something that I'm super passionate about, and it's repurposing versus like reinventing, creating sustainable content strategies. I think oftentimes that's one of the biggest things that we see, or it's a hurdle that we have to overcome, is that they struggle with consistency due to time and resources. That's just kind of the nature of the beast with SMBs. So repurposing is how we can really scale without creating that sort of burnout element.
Right.
One way of doing this is like just what we're doing here now. We have this full-length video, full-length live. We can take this and create clips. We can create a quote from it. We could create 2 to 3 additional LinkedIn posts. You could then repackage that into potentially a blog or into a LinkedIn poll, or maybe it's a short video reel that we take this, we create a clip and we upload it to YouTube Shorts, and we add that this is connected to the full length video. So if they want to click through, they can see the full length video, right? So that's all repurpose opportunities. And what it really allows you to do is, frankly, reinforce your message. It doesn't need to always change, right? I think a lot of times people are like, oh, what's the next best thing, the next shiny object? It's really more of like, this is what we do. Here's how we deliver it. And let's reinforce that message. Let's take content and let's continue to reinforce that message, because again, we know how chaotic today is, how many distractions we get. There is a multi-touch element to marketing, which ultimately drives sales. Are they seeing you on social? Are they seeing you on email? Are you doing a drop-in? Or is there some mailer that you're doing? Like, it's a combination of these elements now. It's not like, oh, it's email. That's it. Like, that's our special sauce. Now, granted, there are elements and channels that probably are more effective, but it's a true cross-channel strategy.
Yep. Yeah, it is. And it's being excited about doing it. So like if we get on here and we drone on and we're not interested in each other at all or in the topic, like if you're just sitting here like, okay, it's some of it is like, I can tell sometimes even before the content is produced that there's no enthusiasm for the content. It's going to fail. I know that sounds crazy, but it's like, get excited about what you're doing and what you're producing. And if you're not, find something that you are excited about that you do, because it comes across. And if you're just sitting on here and you're just like, oh, I have to do this podcast or this vlog or this whatever talk with my coworker, and it comes across, unfortunately, like more than we even realize. And that is data that is hard to capture, but it is true.
It is. When I think what's really cool about that is if you think about it from the perspective of, or if you're not enthusiastic and you are a leader at the business, maybe it's something to look at, like from your own services. Like, are you doing what you really should be doing? Or is there a way that we should maybe look at this from a different marketing message to make it more enthusiastic for you? Because I think that's, to your point, that is a really, really, really real thing. They want to see people that are enthusiastic about a product. And if you aren't able to do that, then that can make it very difficult. So,
yeah, I mean, we've had this agency for 10 years, and I can honestly sit here and say, I remember times, and I was right, where I'm just like, you should have somebody else you shouldn't be doing this. That person shouldn't be in that department. They should not be heading up your branding or your or whatever. I'm not saying anything, but you can tell there's just no enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
And it's pulling teeth. And it's like, why would you want somebody who you have to force to go and give a message to give a message?
Exactly. No, and I think you nailed it, because if your talking head for your business isn't enthusiastic, it reflects on your brand reputation. So I think you need to make sure they mirror each other.
Yes.
And the last little point is that it's with this repackaging, repurposing thing, it should be one idea. Think about that idea. How do we create that? Repurpose it for multiple formats, right? So YouTube short, maybe full length, create a blog, and then you apply that to different channels. So you really can take one idea and spread it across, versus this platform gets this idea, and this idea, and then all of a sudden you're all over the map. So I love the repurpose thing, because it really does allow us to keep almost like the blinders on. You can stay focused. And then once it's done, we can figure out, okay, here, we're going to play this out here, play this out there, versus a whole mix of different messages. So it really does help simplify, which ultimately I think drives strategy. So let's just kind of wrap this up. I know we're passing over the 20-minute mark. The last thing I kind of just want to say is, if you're an SMB wondering why your social strategy isn't getting the traction that you hoped for, it might be just because you're prioritizing content over clarity or presence over purpose. Here at YaZo, we really help businesses build with intention. We use ROI, ROI-driven strategies that really make social media work for you. It's not just something that you should feel forced to keep up with. So if you're ready for a reset, or you just want to explore sort of what's possible, let's talk, let's dive in together. You can connect with us at yazogroup.com, check out that banner, or feel free to shoot us a message right on LinkedIn. We appreciate you giving us the time, and we love doing this. So if you're out there, you have questions, or you want to dig into something, give us a shout. We'd love to have those conversations. Appreciate the time. Have a blessed rest of your week, and enjoy your Thursday. Let's make it a good day, everybody. Take care.
See ya.